Good morning. Thank you for joining me today. This morning we will be in Ezekiel chapter 7, verse 1 through chapter 9, verse 11. The word of the Lord came to me. You, son of man, this is what the sovereign Lord says to the land of Israel. An end. The end is coming on the four corners of the land. The end is now upon you, and I will release my anger against you. I will judge you according to your behavior. I will hold you accountable for all your abominable practices. My eye will not pity you, I will not spare you, for I will hold you responsible for your behavior, and you will suffer the consequences of your abominable practices. Then you will know that I am the Lord. This is what the sovereign Lord says. A disaster, a one-of-a-kind disaster is coming. An end comes. The end comes. It has awakened against you. The end is upon you. Look, it is coming. Doom is coming upon you who live in the land. The time is coming. The day is near. There are sounds of tumult, not shouts of joy, on the mountains. Soon now I will pour out my rage on you. I will fully vent my anger against you. I will judge you according to your behavior. I will hold you accountable for all your abominable practices. My eye will not pity you, I will not spare you. For your behavior I will hold you accountable, and you will suffer the consequences of your abominable practices. Then you will know that it is I, the Lord, who is striking you. Look, the day. Look, it is coming. Doom has gone out. The staff has budded, pride has blossomed. Violence has grown into a staff that supports wickedness. Not one of them will be left, not from their crowd, not from their wealth, not from their prominence. The time has come, the day has struck. The customer should not rejoice, nor the seller mourn, for divine wrath comes against their whole crowd. The customer will no longer pay the seller, while both parties are alive. For the vision against the whole crowd will not be revoked. Each person, for his iniquity, will fail to preserve his life. They have blown the trumpet, and everyone is ready, but no one goes to battle, because my anger is against their whole crowd. The sword is outside, pestilence and famine are inside the house. Whoever is in the open field will die by the sword, and famine and pestilence will consume everyone in the city. Their survivors will escape to the mountains and become like doves of the valleys. All of them will moan, each one for his iniquity. All of their hands will hang limp, their knees will be wet with urine. They will wear sackcloth, terror will cover them, shame will be on all their faces, and all their heads will be shaved bald. They will discard their silver in the streets, and their gold will be treated like filth. Their silver and gold will not be able to deliver them on the day of the Lord's fury. They will not satisfy their hunger or fill their stomachs, because their wealth was the obstacle leading to their iniquity. They rendered the beauty of his ornaments into pride, and with it they made their abominable images, their detestable idols. Therefore I will render it filthy to them. I will give it to foreigners as loot, to the world's wicked ones as plunder, and they will desecrate it. I will turn my face away from them, and they will desecrate my treasured place. Vandals will enter it and desecrate it. Make the chain, because the land is full of murder, and the city is full of violence. I will bring the most wicked of the nations, and they will take possession of their houses. I will put an end to the arrogance of the strong, and their sanctuaries will be desecrated. Terror is coming. They will seek peace, but find none. Disaster after disaster will come, and one rumor after another. They will seek a vision from a prophet. Priestly instructions will disappear, along with the counsel from the elders. The king will mourn, and the prince will be clothed with shuddering. The hands of the people of the land will tremble. Based on their behavior I will deal with them, and by their standard of justice I will judge them. Then they will know that I am the Lord. In the 6th year, in the 6th month, on the 5th of the month, as I was sitting in my house with the elders of Judah sitting in front of me, the hand of the sovereign Lord seized me. As I watched, I noticed a form that appeared to be a man. From his waist downward was something like fire, and from his waist upward something like a brightness, like an amber glow. He stretched out the form of a hand and grabbed me by a lock of hair on my head. Then a wind lifted me up between the earth and sky and brought me to Jerusalem by means of divine visions, to the door of the inner gate, which faces north, where the statue, which provokes to jealousy, was located. Then I perceived that the glory of the God of Israel was there, as in the vision I had seen earlier in the valley. He said to me, Son of man, look up toward the north. So I looked up toward the north, and I noticed to the north of the altar gate was the statue of jealousy at the entrance. He said to me, Son of man, do you see what they are doing, the great abominations that the people of Israel are practicing here, to drive me far from my sanctuary? But you will see greater abominations than these. He brought me to the entrance of the court, and as I watched, I noticed a hole in the wall. He said to me, Son of man, dig into the wall. So I dug into the wall and discovered a doorway. He said to me, Go in and see the evil abominations they are practicing here. So I went in and looked. I noticed every figure of creeping thing and beast, detestable images, and every idol of the house of Israel, engraved on the wall and all around. 70 men from the elders of the house of Israel, with Jezaniah son of Shaphan standing among them, were standing in front of them, each with a censer in his hand, and fragrant vapors from a cloud of incense were swirling upward. He said to me, Do you see, son of man, what the elders of the house of Israel are doing in the dark, each in the chamber of his idolatrous images? For they think, The Lord does not see us, the Lord has abandoned the land. He said to me, You will see them practicing even greater abominations. Then he brought me to the entrance of the north gate of the Lord's house. I noticed women sitting there, weeping for Tammuz. He said to me, Do you see this, son of man? You will see even greater abominations than these. Then he brought me to the inner court of the Lord's house. Right there at the entrance to the Lord's temple, between the porch and the altar, were about 25 men, with their backs to the Lord's temple, facing east. They were worshipping the sun toward the east. He said to me, Do you see, son of man, is it a trivial thing that the house of Judah commits these abominations they are practicing here? For they have filled the land with violence, and provoked me to anger still further. Look, they are putting the branch to their nose. Therefore I will act with fury. My eye will not pity them, nor will I spare them. When they have shouted in my ears, I will not listen to them. Then he shouted in my ears, Approach, you who are to visit destruction on the city, each with his destructive weapon in his hand. Next I noticed 6 men coming from the direction of the upper gate, which faces north, each with his war club in his hand. Among them was a man dressed in linen, with a writing kit at his side. They came and stood beside the bronze altar. Then the glory of the God of Israel went up from the cherub, where it had rested, to the threshold of the temple. He called to the man dressed in linen, who had the writing kit at his side. The Lord said to him, Go through the city of Jerusalem, and put a mark on the foreheads of the people who moan and groan over all the abominations practiced in it. While I listened, he said to the others, Go through the city after him, and strike people down. Do not let your eye pity nor spare anyone. Old men, young women, little children, and women, wipe them all out. But do not touch anyone who has the mark. Begin at my sanctuary. So they began with the elders who were at the front of the temple. He said to them, Defile the temple and fill the courtyard with corpses. Go. So they went out and struck people down throughout the city. While they were striking them down, I was left alone, and I threw myself face down and cried out, Ah, sovereign Lord, will you destroy the entire remnant of Israel when you pour out your fury on Jerusalem? He said to me, The sin of the house of Israel and Judah is extremely great. The land is full of murder, and the city is full of corruption. For they say, The Lord has abandoned the land, and the Lord does not see. But as for me, my eye will not pity them, nor will I spare them. I hereby repay them for what they have done. Next I noticed the man dressed in linen, with the writing kit at his side, bringing back word. I've done just as you commanded me. Got something of a sneeze. Thank you. So, you have, well, Ezekiel chapter 7 was, very, like, reminiscent of, like, a sandwich board style, the end is near kind of thing. Very intense language, very vivid. It's right at the doorstep. Vivid in its proximity and its intensity. Yeah. And I mean, considering the period in which this is written. This is very close to the end of Judah, so it would be good if they heeded this. And following that, you have in chapters 8 and, well, in chapter 8, the a partial reason for why this is happening, and it's because of all the idolatry that's being practiced, not only secretly in men's houses, but also publicly in the temple of the Lord. So. See what Guzik has to say on this whole thing. If it ever loads. Yeah. Ezekiel was sitting in his house with the elders of Judah sitting before me. This reminds us that Ezekiel had his own house and that he was respected enough as God's prophet to receive the elders of Judah for an audience in his home. The quote regarding Tammuz. This is the only mention of Tammuz in Ezekiel and the Old Testament. This was another example of pagan worship, and Tammuz was a deity worshipped by many in neighboring nations, often with immoral or impure rites. Ezekiel was dismayed because women were there in the holy place reserved only for priests, and because of their immoral idolatry. The worship of Tammuz came from Babylon, though the Phoenicians, that is the Canaanites, and then the Greeks, well, through the Phoenicians, and then the Greeks. Tammuz mentioned nowhere else in the scriptures, was the Babylonian Dumuzi, beloved of Ishtar, and is to be identified with the Greek Adonis. In the seasonal mythological cycle, he died early in the fall when vegetation withered. His revival by the wailing of Ishtar was marked by the buds of spring and the fertility of the land. Such renewal was encouraged and celebrated by licentious fertility festivals. So, another fertility god, with which it seems like, I know with Baal worship, it seems similar to the little Baal worship that I know, where the rites of the pagan worship kind of correspond to the seasons, and there's this element of death and rebirth in it, corresponding with, the end of the harvest and the beginning of the harvest again. So, carrying on, Hebrews chapter 5, verses 1 through 14. For every high priest is taken from among the people and appointed to represent them before God, to offer both gifts and sacrifices for sins. He is able to deal compassionately with those who are ignorant and erring, since he also is subject to weakness. And for this reason, he is obligated to make sin offerings for himself, as well as for the people. And no one assumes this honor on his own initiative, but only when called to it by God, as in fact Aaron was. So also Christ did not glorify himself in becoming high priest, but the one who glorified him was God, who said to him, "You are my son, today I have fathered you." As also in another place God says, "You are a priest forever in the order of Melchizedek." During his earthly life, Christ offered both requests and supplications with loud cries and tears to the one who was able to save him from death, and he was heard because of his devotion. Although he was a son, he learned obedience through the things he suffered, and by being perfected in this way, he became the source of eternal salvation to all who obey him, and he was designated by God as high priest in the order of Melchizedek. On this topic, we have much to say, and it is difficult to explain, since you have become sluggish in hearing. For though you should in fact be teachers by this time, you need someone to teach you the beginning elements of God's utterances. You've gone back to needing milk, not solid food. For everyone who lives on milk is inexperienced in the message of righteousness, because he is an infant. But solid food is for the mature, whose perceptions are trained by practice to discern both good and evil. Which that's a good reminder that it's not that the spiritual life we live in Christ is one is not one that's that we're just super Christians immediately out of the gate, but it's one that's built up by discipline and training and practice in righteousness. And in Hebrews 5:14, even your perceptions are trained by practice to discern both good and evil, which it's good to remember that that we should all be learning and growing in Christ. Yeah, and this Melchizedek, he was a figure only spoken of in Genesis, essentially, who preceded Levi and Aaron as priests, because after the Battle of the Kings, with Abraham going out and defeating this coalition of kings that had captured his relative Lot, he gave certain tribute to this Melchizedek, who was priest of God Most High. But there, and that's basically the whole of the story. So, yeah, Hebrews goes on to talk about the how Jesus is a priest in the order of Melchizedek. But the summary of it, I think, is that it's not a priesthood that depends on lineage, like the Levitical priesthood. Yeah, and further things are drawn from it. Carrying on, Psalm 105, verses 1 through 15. Give thanks to the Lord, call on his name, make known his accomplishments among the nations. Sing to him, make music to him, tell about all his miraculous deeds. Boast about his holy name, let the hearts of those who seek the Lord rejoice. Seek the Lord in the strength he gives, seek his presence continually. Recall the miraculous deeds he performed, his mighty acts and the judgments he decreed. O children of Abraham, God's servant, you descendants of Jacob, God's chosen ones. He is the Lord, our God. He carries out judgment throughout the earth. He always remembers his covenantal decree, the promise he made to 1,000 generations, the promise he made to Abraham, the promise he made by oath to Isaac. He gave it to Jacob as a decree, to Israel as a lasting promise, saying, To you I will give the land of Canaan as the portion of your inheritance. When they were few in number, just a very few, and resident aliens within it, they wandered from nation to nation, and from one kingdom to another. He let no one oppress them. He disciplined kings for their sake, saying, Don't touch my chosen ones. Don't harm my prophets. And finally, Proverbs chapter 26, verse 28. A lying tongue hates those crushed by it, and a flattering mouth works ruin. It's interesting. I don't normally associate lying with active malice, but I suppose it is. A flattering mouth works ruin. Well, thank you for joining me today. I hope you have a great day. Bye.